Hey, welcome back to the show. And joining us today is returning guest Mike Harris, the editor of the Intel Drop. Mike, how you been? Good to see you.
I've been doing well, Christian. How are you? How are things been? I've noticed you getting some real top quality guests lately. Listened to a couple of your recent interviews, and it's always interesting stuff. So thanks for inviting me back on.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm doing great overall, and I feel like I'm covering I'm covering topics that you just don't hear even in some respects in alternative media. A lot of people go to, let's say, a Tucker, or they go to maybe a Sean Ryan. I mean, I don't watch Sean Ryan very much, if at all. And some of these other people that you'll see on like Rumble, but they don't touch on certain topics. It's like everything is like is in disparate parts, and you just have to try and like map it together, kind of the puzzle. What I'm getting at is kind of the occult esoteric elements with the clique or the cabal, whatever you want to call it. So I've been very fascinated by that, and I've just been asking people. I'm genuinely curious, what's going on. We hear about Pete Hegseth. I've seen a video circulating from 10 years ago, and even like 8 years ago, about him talking about a third temple and other kind of messianic, kind of Zionist stuff, things of that nature. And then I think there were some comments that he had made within the past 24 or 48 hours that I think are germane. But or just interesting times. And, perhaps you can start us off with your latest thoughts, what you're seeing and observing out there, Mike.
Well, I think that these topics, these more esoteric topics about things that have been occulted and hidden from us, I think now is the time to bring those out because we're getting so much truth revealed. And one of the things that we as a people, as a culture, have been inculcated to is with the acceptance of the scientific way and the scientific method for problem solving and reaching creative solutions to problems that have confounded mankind for a long time. Is we were taught to not believe what was in the occult or what was in the esoteric realms. And really, what you're talking about then is the spiritual realm, whether it's your own spirituality within yourself or within spirituality within the environment that you're occupying. And so I think we're going to reach a balance on these things where both schools of thought have, they're both relative to the situation we're in right now. I hear many people talking, throughout the internet, in real life, talking about how we're in a spiritual battle right now. This is the forces of good against evil. This is the battle that's been going on for, since the beginning of time. And this is just our version of it, our iteration of it. And woo-wee, it's, I, to have to consider that many of these things are real, if that's the direction that we go, that really does open your mind up and open your heart and soul up to a whole different sets of circumstances and perspectives that we as Americans, Westerners in particular, have been told to shut out of our life because they're not supported by the scientific method. So, we're coming to these. It's I would like to say it's almost a come to Jesus meeting for certain people, and other people it's come to the other side meeting for them. But it seems to be that no one's going to be left on the sidelines. You're going to have to choose a side, and you're going to have to go with it. But like I said, living in a Western culture for the duration of my life, it has inculcated me that the scientific method is really the religion that we accept in the West, and we don't accept these. Go on a hunch, go on a feeling because my heart and soul told me to, or we kind of shut those voices out of ourselves, and sometimes to our own detriment we've done that. But this is we're truly living in interesting times because we don't know how this is going to shake out. All of the old assumptions we had made about our lives and our existence are turning out to need. We have to go through them one by one and say which one's real, which one's not. Where were we deceived at? Where were we fooled? What is still accurate? What's still spot on? Every human being is going through this right now in some form or another.
I'll comment in that in saying, I think that's been by design. And I think just as they were trying to do this transhumanist stuff, wherein we go from carbon to this synthetic, fake, whatever you want to call it, whether that's in the food or transhumanism, etc. You're hearing more stuff. At least I'm seeing posts regarding 6G, and I guess legislation Trump has rolled out. Back to your comments regarding spirituality and esoteric religious stuff. I thought I'd comment that I think that has been, as mentioned, by design to divorce people, divorce humanity from another world or realm, or whatever you want to call it, dimension that exists and has existed, but has been intentionally obfuscated or diminished and downplayed. And so that's very interesting. And to the people, you commented on, I think offline, some of the guests that I've had on the show, and we were touching on topics that I've never heard Victor Davis Hanson talk about this stuff. I've never heard Tom Luongo. I can't say if I don't think he's met, or Alex Craner. I'm just mentioning different names that people go to, and I'm not chastising these people whatsoever. I've had Tom on the show previously. But they don't ever talk about these talk about these things. And even Promethean Action, I think, is another one. I watched a little bit of it some time ago, but there's a lot of focus on like City of London, Trump is playing 5D chess and this or that, but there's never ever mentioning of the Vatican.
Chabad and the gematria, the Kabbalah, and
Yeah.
all these things. There's no mention of these things. Well, you look at what they've done to us. Okay, did anybody really want fluoride put in their water? I don't think so. But what fluoride in your water does is it causes your pituitary gland to calcify, and no, I'm sorry, the pineal gland to calcify. And the pineal gland is really where your third eye is said to reside, and that's what gives you your insights, your psychic abilities to read minds or to project thoughts or get a feeling from someone who may be half a world away. And that's if they want to calcify that and retard it so it doesn't function the way it's supposed to. Why is that? Why would that be important to them? There's other better dental treatments available today. So why are they still calcifying? Not calcifying, still putting fluoride in the water. Why would they do that? I mean, unless they want to control an aspect of us that they don't want to take root, don't want to blossom.
Yeah, 100%. I'll also add further. I'm sure you saw a post, just a few days ago. I guess there was this blood moon,
Yes.
and it touches on the astrology, which I'm very intrigued. I've been picking up books on it, just trying to understand, because people take this very seriously. I know people very high up in the totem pole, and so I figured if they're reading it, like, okay, well, I want to know what's going on. Is this going to give me some insights? If I know certain times in dates of the year, I know like September 11th. Obviously, that was 9/11, but it's got some esoteric element to it. So, I just surmise if you can kind of educate yourself, maybe you can be more aware of, geez, there might be some false flag event, Anna, around this time, or some, fill in the blanket thing with the market.
Well, I think is interesting is March 3rd was the beginning of Purim, the festival that the Jews celebrate their victory. They had infiltrated the Persian Empire. Persian Empire saw what they were up to, wanted to get rid of them, expel them, kick them out, and then they turned around and slaughtered the Persians in their own country. And that is Persia is now Iran, and so that was March 3rd was their anniversary of that. The great victory by deception. This is what the Book of Esther is written about. And you look at that and say, okay, timing's pretty peculiar here for attacking the Iranians, since that was geographically the same territory as Persia was. So anyway, just coincidences, like you said. No one can actually tie to it. But if you look at most of the Jewish holidays, most of them celebrate them slaughtering some other people. That's their big celebration. You look at Yom Kippur, another one. That all their I had a list of them here someplace. So I could probably pull it up. But these people wanting to they celebrate the death of other people, other cultures that they have destroyed. Somehow that doesn't seem very Christian to me. Just to give my own personal bias and your background I was raised in. So
100%. Well, we're on what, day 6, day 7 of this war, and it's sure to metastasize, I presume.
well, boy, Trump really, excuse me for saying it, but he really put his dick in a ringer. I'm sorry, but he did. This was the dumbest thing he could have done, and he'd had to work hard to find something dumber to do than this. I mean, didn't we learn our lessons from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Libya, even from Syria, where you go in and you take out a regime? It's not peaceful. It's not nice. It's a really rough, fragmented, violent area that you leave in total disarray after you do that. And you think that the Middle East has enough instability as it is right now because of Iraq, because of Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya. There's enough already that a time of stability needs to come. And no, he has to go take on Iran, which was um, positioned to be one of the leading powers in the region between them and Turkey, and of course Israel. There's a competition among the three of them as to who's going to be the hegemon for the region. And it's pretty obvious. It should be to most people that Trump is not doing the thinking and planning for what the United States is being engaged in. This appears to be more of an Israeli foreign policy than a U.S. foreign policy, because I see no benefit to the U.S. at all for what we're doing. We're going to go spend what, billions, maybe trillions of dollars, and come home with a lot of dead service members, which I don't want to see. And there is no upside to this. I mean, how many people did we kill in Iraq when George W. Bush convinced the world that they must have weapons of mass destruction that would never materialize? But yet we killed hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people in Iraq. Same with Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden. All they did was give him refuge. They weren't plotting 9/11. They didn't do anything with it. Mullah Omar got a really bad rap on that, and Afghanistan still hasn't recovered from the 20-year U.S. occupation. May never recover. And so now we're going to go do the same thing to Iran, which has been really a foundational country for all of civilization on the world, going east and west. It's had an influence on all of it. And we want to go back and destroy a culture that took 10,000 years to evolve to here. I don't want any part of destroying it. I want to see it preserved. Do I like Islam? No, I'm not a fan of Islam at all. In fact, I'm kind of afraid of them because they're so radical, and they seem so inflexible in their approach. And but do I want to go in there and commit American troops to go in there and fight and die for a regime change war? No, not at all. It's not even on my list. In fact, it repulses me. Like I said, this is a tragic mistake that Trump made, and he's not going to pay the price for it. Our kids are. Our kids who are active duty age, ones who've signed up because the economy is struggling. There's no other jobs. They're going to go in and they're going to do what they're assigned to do. But this is a futile effort. And when you look at how poorly the U.S. did in Vietnam, look at how poorly we did in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and now we're going into Iran, which is 6 times larger than Iraq was geographically. Probably what 4 or 5 times the population. Iraq had what 25, 30 million people. Iran has 93 million people. Much bigger country, much more resources. They can fight a long time. And in addition, the Iranians are world class engineers, world class scientists. They have always been really good, really proficient in the maths and the hard sciences. And this is being demonstrated with how well their missile program is going. It's really impressing the world with what they have built and how effective they can be. They've really done some good engineering work to create the products that they did to destroy Israel.
Well, you mentioned about America's sons and daughters being sent overseas, and I doubt we'll see Barron or Any of Trump's kids, pledge support, etc. Same thing with Netanyahu. I've seen pictures on social media of his son in Miami, and I'm sure he's living a fine life. And
Living the good life down there, partying like a rock star. Yeah, I'm sure he is, but that's the problem. I mean, in our distant past, well, not that distant, within the last several hundred years, kings and their families used to lead the army into battle, and now they're in the rear with the gear. So if that, we're not going to see a Trump, we're not going to see a Lindsey Graham, we're not going to see any of these warmongers going out there and enlisting and going to fight for the cause they want our kids to die for. It shows me that they have a lack of commitment on their part. They don't think it's that important. It's just more of a game for them as long as it's only your kids that are dying, not theirs. So,
you know, oh, go ahead. I think you're going to comment on them. Oh, I was just going to comment and say I'm glad you brought that up as it relates to the historical framework because yeah, that was the case. Of course, I mean, even going back to ancient times, if you were the sovereign of your nation, you're expected to lead either militarily or be more involved in some capacity, and you do not see that today at all. And I think that's a very interesting observation.
no, it is, and that's see, it's one of the reasons. This may sound a little out of the norm, but I support mandatory military service for every American when they hit their 18th birthday. Men and women. I mean, you're 18 years old. You give us 2 years. We'll bring you into the military. We'll train you. We will teach you everything you need to know. It does two things. Well, it does many things. But one of them is it gives these kids who are 18 2 years to grow up and figure out what they don't want to do. And then when they go off to seek a higher education, if that's what they choose to do, they at least have a foundation. They've had time to mature and develop a little bit. My biggest problem when I was in undergraduate school was figuring out, what do I want to do the rest of my life? And if I'd have had a clear vision on that, my career might have been entirely different, but I never did. I never knew what I wanted to do. I was just too young to be there to make that decision. I think a lot of kids go through that. It's a tough thing to figure out. What is it that I'm going to do for the rest of my life? And it buys time. And the other thing it does is it gives us a really deep bench. As far as reserves and backups and things, going on. It would take 20 years to get it fully populated, but we'd have a bench where all the adult men have got 2 years of military experience under their belt. So if we were ever had a real problem domestically or internationally, we've got suddenly a huge army, not just 1.5 million we have currently. And the third thing is that it gives the voters an incentive to not put warmonger type politicians in, like Lindsey Graham's and others who never met a war they didn't like because they're getting supported by the military industrial complex. That's what gives them their campaign contributions. But if we had every mom and dad out there who's got a 17-year-old kid getting ready to go in the military next year doesn't want to see a war start, everybody who's got a kid in between 18 and 20 doesn't want to see a war start. Anybody who's 20 and up doesn't want to see a war start because they're going to get called back. And the canard that we have, the illusion we have that we have a voluntary military. It's all volunteer. Well, it is. You have to sign up for it. You have to enlist, choosing it. But if we had a mandatory 2-year service, term of service, your conscription, then there would be a lot of pressure on the politicians to not go off and fight in these stupid wars. It's one of the reasons I voted for Trump, and he says, I'm not going to get us in any of these more wars. We're not going to be entering regime change wars. Well, the hell we're not. Trump, it shows me that the lobby out there has more power than the sitting president of the United States. And you say, well, how is that possible? He was elected. 78 million people voted for him. How could they have more power? Well, because we have 535 sitting, congressmen and senators right now, and all but 9 of them have taken money from the Israel lobby. And so what that tells you, and it tells me, it tells everybody, is our elected representatives do not represent us because we don't pay them. The Israel lobby pays them. Big Pharma pays them. The military-industrial complex pays them. Anybody who pays any of these donors, whether they're private or commercial, like a business or let's just say sector lobbying groups. Like you have one for the car manufacturers, one for the military-industrial complex. All of these different groups are lobbying them to keep the spigot on. Keep going. We need another confrontation. We need another battle. I mean, we're not going to make a quarterly profit. Our year's looking bad. We have to start another war. And we've allowed our economy to become so dependent upon constant fighting that we can't sustain it. We can't afford $1 trillion a year budget that Trump wants to increase to 1.5 trillion. We can't afford it. We're taking too much money out of too many other things. And we've got to mitigate our defense spending. We're hollowing everything else out. All the other departments are suffering. I mean, drive on the interstates. They're pretty beat. They're beat up. Let's just say they could use some real maintenance. They could use some expansion. Our airport infrastructures. I mean, anybody's been through Chicago O'Hare lately? It's a dump. You compare this to the Asian air terminals and stuff. Go to Changi and Singapore. Go to Tokyo International. Go to these are nice, new, shiny airports, and they function well. Our grid is on the let's just say it needs an overhaul. It needs to be hardened. We're still subject to Carrington events and or EMPs, if those would happen. So we've got a grid that's neglected, a power grid. Our internet grid is also being neglected. That thing's over 25, 30 years old. Needs some upgrades. Our schools need upgrades. Our railway needs upgrades. Virtually every infrastructure of any merit in this country needs money spent on it. They've been taking money out of our taxes, our budgets, everything else to maintain these things, but we don't really see much maintenance. We don't see these things improving. We see them continuing to decay. And so why is that? It's the other problem we have with corruption. And if this one can siphon a few nickels out of that fund and a few nickels out of this other fund, next thing you know, he's retiring pretty wealthy. And but the projects aren't getting done if too many people have their hands in the trough trying to to take the money out of it. I fear to see what's happening in the United States. I fear that we have money earmarked for things that's not being spent on the things that we want it spent on. And so we have to prioritize the spending in this country and figure out what's really important. What do we really need? What's going to keep the country running? What's going to make us the most sovereign nation? What's really going to strengthen us? Defense spending, we're to the point of diminishing returns. We can't spend anymore and have it buy anymore. I mean, we've got all the money that you can spend, all the money you can waste on it. And the Pentagon has, in my lifetime, I'm not aware of them ever passing an audit. We just had another one that they came back and said it's unauditable, they can't do it. So, there's nobody keeping track of this money. There's no one watching where it goes, how it's being spent, is it being spent cost effectively. It's anybody's guess, but I doubt it somehow.
Well, we seem to always have money for these regime changes, these conflicts. I'm even hearing that I guess they're doing operations more in Latin America that are going on that are not really making the news. I hear more and more out just being out and about where I'm at. People, a lot of people out of work. A lot of people very challenged. I rent out space to people looking for place to live, and I'm finding a lot more people older. Whether it's they're going through a divorce or they've had some financial challenge, and so that's been a continued observation. People struggling to find work. A lot of young men really struggling, and women in some regards too. I'm sure finding work, especially millennial Gen Z, and what else was going to comment on? Just even Mike, the clips that people share on X of parts of Philadelphia or parts of LA or parts of New York where people are just on drugs. I mean, they're zombies. There was a video that actually really hit me. It really moved me in a way I haven't been before. and it was a video, and the person had an overlay of a sound bite that was befitting for this scene, and they had the text above. This is the "Make America Great Again," and it's just people on what is called crank or twink or whatever it's called, where they're just like a zombie, and they're just completely checked out. It's like, this is, pardon my French, this is fucking insane. What the fuck? Like this country's fucked.
Well, it is, and this has been allowed to happen. You know, it's been allowed. Like you talk about Philadelphia, they've got this drug where they mix fentanyl and some other horse-based thing with them, and they mix them together, and it gets them really high, and but it causes their skin to rot and their flesh to rot off their body. I mean, this is The Walking Dead. I mean, Rick Grimes had it together more together than we know in that series. That what we're seeing is really tantamount to watching The Walking Dead. These people who are this drugged up, this drowned. Do you think that rehab is going to save them? Do you think anything is going to bring them back and to make them a functional human being again? Boy, I don't see it. It really behooves me. And so, meanwhile, the drugs are still getting here. They're still out on the streets, and we need to really look at these things and reform. How do we do business? I mean, what we're doing now in the drug issues, it's obviously not working because we wouldn't have these zones. We've got the zombies where the zombies live. The homeless, the drug impaired, and but they exist. They exist in every major city. Red or blue doesn't matter. I mean, you go to Phoenix, Arizona, you can see them. Go to Philadelphia, you can see them. L.A., they're everywhere. These people, they exist. And what are we going to do with them? How do we get them? If we can't get them through rehab and get them back to functional, what do we do with them if this is how they're going to be the rest of their life? These are questions that need to be addressed. And then we need to address, why isn't law enforcement doing a better job? How come the drug problem has grown so exponentially, and yet the law enforcement response to it hasn't kept up, hasn't even come near? And so, I look at the other problems we have in our society, and well, corruption's a pretty big deal. And the cartels, if you don't play ball with them, they'll make you a choice. They'll, the old saying is, we can give you silver, make you rich, or we can give you lead and make you dead. And that's kind of what they do. I've known people who were offered that deal and chose the lead, and by golly, they ended up dead. And it's just how the cartel plays the game. So how do we play the game if we don't want to become a failed narco state ourselves? Because that's really where this path leads to if we don't put a stop to it. So, what are we going to do? How are we going to change how our laws are enforced? How are we going to change the laws that we're going to enforce? Do we have the right model here now? Or do we need to modify it somehow? I mean,
Well,
go ahead.
oh no, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. I cut you off.
No, you're fine. I'll catch up. I got the thoughts saved.
Oh, gotcha. Now I was going to comment on your friend. I remember you sharing, I think 2 appearances ago, about how I think he was in a crash, and it was just
Yeah,
uncharacteristic,
yeah.
and that happened. That's sad.
Well, that was I'm referencing Sheriff Larry Deaver in Cochise County, and the official report says that he died in a single vehicle drunk driving accident on a dirt road in Coconino County where he was on a hunting trip. But his blood alcohol was excessively high. This is a guy I'd known for some time. I've never seen him take a drink in public, ever. Never. And he and I were not drinking buddies. As far as I knew, he didn't drink. I never saw it. So, what really happened? But, also had a broken neck as a result of that. So, this was a very, very strange accident. And he had been approached a month or so before that about the method he was going to deploy to monitor the border on Cochise County, which is contiguous to Mexico. So he said he wasn't going to change it. He's dead. They got a new guy in there, and by golly, the next month they changed how the department was run. So these things happen. These things happen to people. It just left many questions in my mind because, in my opinion, that was a cartel hit. No matter what the police report says, no matter what the certificate of death, the accident report, no matter what it says, in my opinion, that was a cartel hit. That they took this guy out because he was in their way of their business. And that's how they work. So, you know, one of the things that's the advantage for the criminal is we stick with all these laws and due process and all these different functions that make our legal system a great one. Everybody has rights, everybody has these things, but the bad guys don't have those things. If you're in their way and if you're impeding their profitability, they'll put a bullet in your head, or they'll run your car off the road, or they'll poison you, or something else. They'll get rid of you somehow. We don't. If we follow the rules, we're standing in a hole before we even start. I mean, they've got an advantage of us already. I apply that. I look at this issue with these liberal judges, these Boasberg judge who were the gang member from MS-13 to be flown back from El Salvador back to the U.S. because he didn't have his due process rights. Well, what due process do these illegal aliens use when they invade my country by crossing the border illegally? So they're that they're in this country, they're entitled to due process, even though they didn't follow the due process to get in this country legally. These contradictions need to be rectified somehow. And, I think that we need to expedite this, have a streamlined case where everyone can get due process, but it's got to happen at a much faster rate. But, back to the drug issue, we have a serious drug problem in this country. And, we've seen this before. We've seen the Brits use it against China in the Opium Wars, and that really is what got the Brits access to Hong Kong for their 99-year lease. There was the Opium Wars and the money and the conflict that was going on there. But you look at what a drain on society when you have a class of people who are permanent drug addicts, and they don't work. They steal. They commit other crimes, violent and otherwise, and they consume a lot of drugs and make your adversary very wealthy in the process. And so we really need to look at what do we want our drug policy in this country to look like, because what we're doing doesn't work. Do we get more severe? Do we make it a death penalty for selling drugs like crack cocaine or meth or fentanyl or opioids? Do we make that a death penalty if you're doing them without the proper license? We want the pharmacies to sell opioids, yes, because people need painkillers when they have surgeries and stuff. But we don't want the guy on the street selling them. So how do we restructure this? And these are questions that people have to ask and say, what is a reasonable approach? What's going to work? And so we have to build a model there based on precedent. Everyone should go look at what Portugal did when they legalized many of their drugs, at least decriminalized them. I mean, they still have penalties for if you're driving while you're high or intoxicated on drugs, but the simple possession and use things, those have all gone by the wayside, and the crime has gone down. The overdose deaths have gone way down, and then cost of the drugs has gone way down. So do we legalize things and take the profit motive out of it, or not legalize, but at least decriminalize, so that there is no profit motive? I mean, a gram of cocaine costs about 7 cents to make in Colombia. It sells retail here for $100. That's a pretty good incentive to bend the law, break the law. And so how do we take the profit motive out of this? I mean, I'm open to suggestions. I don't like the concept of legalizing everything. Maybe we reprioritize things, like they've done with marijuana. Now it's decriminalized in many states, legal possession. Nobody has a problem with it. But do we do that with other drugs? The psilocybin mushrooms you're talking about. Colorado's tried that. I think Oregon's tried that. The MDMA to treat PTSD and other things, give it a medical purpose, a medical use for people who need it, can benefit from it. But what do we do with these things? Do we make a death penalty for the drugs that are truly toxic to human life? Well, like I said, these are questions that need to be addressed. And what we're doing now doesn't work. We can solve this problem, we can make it better, but we need to go back and rethink and retool our legal structure so that it can address these issues in a cost-effective manner and stop this problem. How many more tens, hundreds of thousands of lives are we going to let drugs ruin? That's the question. So
100%. I was also going to mention about the events that happened in Mexico a week and a half ago, roughly 2 weeks ago, over in Puerto Vallarta, and I think it was that, yeah. And I was hearing from sources who were there saying that it was not what was portrayed, and that it was theater, that it was a psyop, and also just to give color to how sophisticated the cartel is. I mean, they, of course, you know that, but to the audience, some tuning in, they even shorted the market before they I don't know if it was silver. Yeah, actually one. Go ahead. I think you're gonna chime in.
no, let's take a top down look. One of the things that's happening with the price of silver going way up is a lot of these banks and others who deal in these metals. Chase comes up as a big one, but they have some short positions that they're extremely exposed on, and the higher the price goes, the more their exposure is. So, is it worth a few $1 billion for them to go down and cause, like you said, theater in Mexico to give the illusion that Mexico is an unstable country? I think it is unstable, but to reinforce that perception that Mexico is unstable for the drug issue and the drug cartel issue. But really, what they're trying to do is um, disable the silver mining production in Mexico because Mexico produces 25% of the global silver produced annually. So if they did that, then they can call force majeure, say it's an act of war, it's beyond our control, we're out of our contracts, and that saves the big banks and it gets them off the hook for their derivative damages that they would have if they fail to deliver on their contracts that they shorted. So that I mean, you know, you have a up to a 4 quadrillion value of the derivative. Nobody really knows. It's somewhere between 2.5 quadrillion and 4 quadrillion. So let's say 3 quadrillion. Let's just put it in the middle there. You have a 3 quadrillion overhang of potential collapse that could happen on the derivatives market if silver collapses. And what happens when one party who insured another party can't insure them? They collapse, and then they can't collect on their policy they bought. And this ripples throughout the entire economy throughout until all 3 quadrillion of those derivatives are null and void, no good. And the whole global financial system implodes. There will be no credit. There will be no. I think we're going to go into what they call the Greater Depression, and it may take 10, 20 years to get out of it. Who knows? But is it worth for the banks to go in there and do some nefarious actions like the theater that Mexico, according to your word, you said it was theater. So if it really was theater, is it worth it for them to go do that and create that illusion? Hell yeah, it is. If it keeps together their whole Ponzi scheme, boy, that's money well spent if they can protect that one.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about potential economic fallout. I mentioned you offline. I've been hearing from our mutual friend Michael Yon. He's been talking about things happen to the logistical system, famine being one of them. I just saw him post a clip the other day, and I watched it, and that was alarming to me. Him talking about how, I guess he used the analogy like it's like a triumvirate. It's like if you have war and then there was something else I'm blanking out on, then you typically have famine follow that. And it sounds out there to say that there'd be a famine, but I mean, I saw somebody. I mentioned who I spoke to somebody earlier today. I said, I mean, if people were flipping out about toilet paper during the 2020, or flipping about Christmas items or what have you during, what I mean, they're fighting each other, fighting. Imagine when you know the trucks are not at Save Mart or Vons or Pavilions or wherever you are, whatever grocer, there's no food. There's nothing you can do. I mean, that'll be a shit show.
Well, let's, Michael Young, I'm a bit of a fan and admirer of his. He was a pretty accomplished guy, I guess, during his active duty days. And he said some smart things. One of the smartest things he said, I mentioned to you earlier, was not all fish can live in the same aquarium. So, just like the U.S., we can't, as a high trust society, import all these third world savages into a country and expect them to fit in. They're not going to fit in. They're going to, loot and rape everything they can get their hands on. That's what they do. They don't fit with us. They need to be kept out. But that was a really brilliant thing that he said. But his tracking of the shipping lanes, and I've been. I'm one of the few people who's actually been to the Straits of Malacca. He talks about it. It's right off the Malaysian coast between there and Indonesia. It's where the Pacific and the Indian Ocean come together. He mentions the Suez Canal. There's the Straits of Hormuz. There's these critical bottleneck shipping lanes that have to be protected. And that's a lot of what's going on with the debate about Greenland and Trump wanting to annex Canada and all that. Is that when a northern shipping route opens up, then who's going to control it? That's why what's going on in Iran is so critical right now, because Iran is central to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which is a land-based shipping lane, which would make the sea-based ones obsolete and no longer cost-effective. And that's going to hurt the Brits. So the Brits are going to push back on that. China and the rest of Europe sees this. Hey, this is a great thing. We can open up markets. We get better products. We can have trade both ways. There's a lot of good for it. But, someone else is going to have to take the loss for it. So, the Israelis aren't going to like it. The British aren't going to like it. They want control of the Suez Canal. They want that there. That's the current shipping lane right now. Everybody's talking about how it's going to impact global trade if they shut that down. But these are real issues, and if you can't ship oranges from the tropics to the northern climes, that's your supply chain breaking down. If you can't ship grains from Ukraine or Russia or the U.S. to Africa, how many people starve there? How many people starve in Asia if they can't get soybeans and rice from the U.S.? These are all legitimate concerns, and this is what underlies this great conflict: is who controls global commerce is what it is. Famine is one of the first consequences you see of this, but there's other consequences that go on as well. But like you said, nobody's going to be worrying about getting a new Toyota if they can't feed their kids. That's going to be their priority. So we've got to focus on this, and I think Jan might be right. We in the U.S. always look at this famine. You're going to have a famine. We're the breadbasket of the world here. We feed everybody. Well, if we don't get diesel fuel, or if the cost of diesel fuel or gasoline goes so far up, because if the Straits of Hormuz are closed up, that's 20% off the top. You close off other Red Sea entry and exit points there. How much more is that? I don't know off the top of my head. But if you start closing off these shipping lanes, then how is the rest of the world going to get the energy it requires? So are they going to try to buy the energy we produce here? Because we're only going to pay, $80 a barrel for it, but they can sell it overseas for $200 a barrel. Where are you going to go to get if you're the producer, where are you going to sell to? And these are the type of conditions that the market is going to have to is going to have to adjust to. And so, at $200 a barrel for crude oil, what's a cost? What's the cost of a gallon of unleaded or a gallon of diesel fuel for your diesel pickup truck? These things go way up. Remember under Obama, $5 a gallon for diesel fuel, and you were lucky if you could get it. And so we've got these things to deal with, and if they shut the Straits of Hormuz and you lose a ship or 3 or 4 there, you're going to have shipping delays going out decades. because it's easier to sink a ship than it is to remove it once it's sunk. And you're going to have these obstacles in the shipping lane. That's a problem. And so, how have we impacted things with this? I mean, this whole attack on Iran was not very well thought through. That's someone looked at. I don't know who told Trump he could get this in and out in 4 days, but he was really gullible if you believe that. You know, we've heard that story before. It'll be a real quick war. No such thing. They grow. They grow exponentially.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you're tracking that you'd like to touch on? I mean, I've been seeing some stuff on 6G. I've been seeing, I know, just looking at financial market stuff. I hear about Reza being this antichrist figure. I've heard some people talk about whatever
Well,
whatever else you'd like to touch on.
well, if you go back to the Pahlavis, you go back to the Shah, who was deposed in '79 with the Islamic Revolution. And like I said, I'm not a fan of Islam at all. I'm not. I think it's sort of a backwards religion. I think they're still stuck in the 7th century, and that Islam has self-censoring, self self-containing language in there that you shall never change Islam. This is the way, and it was written for a 7th century crowd, and never wants them to change from the 7th century. Well, the world has changed. I mean, the technologies that have occurred and exist now that didn't exist then are night and day, but yet Islam's never going to change. And so it's a backwards religion. How they treat people, how they treat their women is abysmal to me. I think women are, the greatest gift from God, and they need to be protected, not brutalized and subjugated the way these men do. Their whole culture is doesn't align with mine. And so, like I said, I would like to see Iran be able to democratically elect someone to govern them that they choose, that they pick. That's one of the fundamental rights I think that all sovereign people have is self-determination. How you're going to run the affairs of your people, of your country, what laws you're going to put in place. That's their right. If they like Islam and they want to live that way, well, God bless them. There's nothing I can do about it. But would I change something for them? Yeah, I'd turn them into a secular government. Whether they can practice Islam in the background, that's up to them. But it's not my choice. It's the people of Iran to determine how they're going to be governed. And so leave them be. Quit stirring the pot. And the Pahlavis were, he was the most brutal, one of the most brutal dictators on the whole planet ever. And this guy had like a bad reputation. When I was in undergraduate school in the 1970s, we had a huge contingent of Iranians at our school, particularly in the science and engineering sections. And they were good students. They worked hard, but to a man and or woman, they were scared to death of the Savak, the secret police that were the Shahs. And they knew that they couldn't get too wild even in the U.S. because they were being watched while they were here in our country by their own secret police. And so it's just interesting how these things are forgotten, and now they're demonizing the Ayatollahs. The Ayatollahs, when they first came to power, were looked at as great liberators to put Islamic order on get rid of the corrupt Western ways. And so you've got but the point I'm trying to make is let the people figure it out themselves. Don't interfere. Don't be the U.S. going in there to regime change somebody. Don't be the Israelis going in there to assassinate the leader you don't like and try to put his nephew or his brother in who you can manipulate. I mean, just leave them alone. They'll figure it out. Leave people alone. But certain parties and groups just can't stay out of other people's business, and that's what they do. And it's one of the things in this country we've had as a big failure is that our intelligence agencies did not establish that we were being manipulated and infiltrated by certain parties that have taken over our entire government. And so these are intelligence failures, and every government has to protect against that meddling into your internal affairs. And we in this country have failed protecting our own.
Well, if I might add as a counter in that, maybe that's just part of it being by design is to allow for for these things to occur and to happen to because there is it is advantageous. I mean that's sad that I that's sad to say that, but I guess yeah.
Well, let's go back and just, if you examine the Constitution itself, the Constitution is a deliberately awkward and cumbersome document to govern by, deliberately, because they don't want change to come in too fast. They want to make the change so overwhelmingly wanted or needed that everyone will go along with it and go through the long process. But all the processes that are articulated within the Constitution itself, I mean, you know what it takes to add a constitutional amendment? I mean, boy, oh boy, it's an effort. You know, all of these things are huge efforts in order to not affect change, to maintain the status quo, is really what the Constitution was designed to be really good at. And for the most part, it is. But like I said, if you want a quick change out of our Constitution, good luck, because it's engineered to be a slow, cumbersome document.
100%. Mike, is there anything else you'd like to share or touch on?
No, I am your obedient servant. Whatever you want to talk about, I will talk about. I mean, what do you?
Well, gosh, I think I'll just comment again in that I just find it so amusing that so many of the people that people listen to, and again, my mental model of things is certainly imperfect, and I'm sure I'll iterate and iterate and iterate and be at a different spot 5 years, 10 years from now, etc. But it is amusing to see people listen to some of these people who are in alternative media who have I don't know 500,000 million, couple million people following them, and they're just led in one direction, or there's like half truths and they're not exposed to other facets that make up the picture. And I just can't emphasize that enough. So when I run into people and talk to people, when they ask, "What have you learned?" or "What's your show?" and I share this, some people it's just like, understandably they're not receptive to it. But yeah, it's just the world is not as it seems, and I guess I'm looking at my notes here. What else I wanted to cover on? I mean, the World War III stuff. Yeah, just we have I think very poor leadership, and
Well,
yeah, it's
Christian, if I can interject one thing, I mean, if I could give, if I could sit down with Trump for 5, 10 minutes and give him advice, what I'd like to see him do, the biggest thing he could do to salvage his presidency and to win elements of the left and solidify most of the right behind him, I would advise him to cut off, disengage with Israel. They're not our best ally. They're not our friend. They're using us. We're being pushed into Iran to fight a war that 85% of America doesn't want, and yet we're going in there. So distance yourself. I mean, distance the country, protect us from Israel, because how they have infiltrated our government, put people in key positions throughout Trump's own cabinet, throughout the bureaucracy, and every cabinet, every agency within the government. They're there, they're everywhere, and just push away from that and get the U.S. As George Washington said, avoid foreign entanglements, and that is a foreign entanglement that we can't afford. And I think it was Wesley Clark who said, General Wesley Clark, who said that Israel is no longer an asset to us in the Middle East; they're a liability, and they are now more than ever. And Trump really, really painted the U.S. as being Israel's muscle for their foreign policy, and we're ignoring what is the foreign policy that's going to be the benefit to the American people itself. Because we didn't gain, what was our gain out of Afghanistan? Nothing. What was our gain out of Iran, Iraq? With it, nothing. Syria, Lebanon, same. We're not benefiting from these changes, these wars we're fighting. But who is? And why now? And are we going to gain anything out of this a war with Iran? No, we're not. We're going to spend a lot of money. We're going to lose a lot of lives. And we hope that the Iranians don't have any missile platforms that can deliver nukes into the U.S., but they may. They may have that. And so we don't know. And so get away from them. They're toxic, and stay away from them. I mean, we don't have to do anything to harm them. Just leave them to their own devices. They'll dig their own hole. But just get away from them. If Trump would come out tomorrow and say we're going to shift our foreign policy, we're no longer going to consider Israel as a friend and ally. We're going to consider them as a neutral third party nation. More than half of the United States would rejoice, and most of the rest of the world would also rejoice that we're no longer taking orders from Bibi Netanyahu. And that would be a big thing and a good thing for the people of the United States. And it would even help things like the value of the dollar overseas. It would help that a great deal so that our dollars bought more stuff. And it would be a benefit, across the board, just to simply say we're no longer an ally of Israel. We're considering them as a neutral nation who is on their own. And it's not hurting them. It's just disengaging. I mean, we don't want to take the beating for their crimes.
Yeah, I mean, they need to completely divorce themselves from that rogue nation, and I mean, that would certainly help. That's for sure.
No, I think it would turn Trump's approval ratings on a dime. I think he would be, wildly popular again, and you might even get about half the left to come on and think he's wildly popular for that. I mean, that would be a good thing for him. Be a good thing for uniting the country. Now, the people who support Israel, well, you had a long run. It's you're back to reality now. We're going to do what's in the best interest of our own country, and not worry about what Israel does. They're on their own too. We're not hurting anyone. We're not trying. We're just cutting them loose. Giving them the freedom to go out and make their own mark on the world without our help.
Amen. Mike, how can people learn more about you as well as get in touch with you?
Oh, just go on the inteldrop.org. You go to the search bar, type in my name. You can find all sorts of articles and interviews, all kinds of things. If you want to reach me, good luck with that. You can send to their admin, write a note to me or something, and they'll forward it. But that's about it. I stay, pretty low key. He said I have no social media presence by design. Did that over a decade plus ago, and I just don't go there. Don't need. I don't need to provide the data to be harvested by the Microsofts and the Googles and the Facebooks and all that. Just don't need it. So anyway,
well, it's a good. I was going to comment that's a good reminder, for all of us tuning in. I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time on social media and such, but how much is harvested, to your point?
And like I said, they know you better than you know yourself. I mean, they've got you down to a science. You are another set of formulas that they can predict your behaviors pretty effectively. So you would find it unsettling.
Oh boy, you're making me think of these insurance companies where they can pinpoint when someone will die.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like that. It really is kind of like that. It's not as final because you're still a going concern. You're a producer for them. And the thing is with cell phones, I mean, they used to not be data harvesting tools. They used to be privacy protection tools. BlackBerry was the best at that. And then when the market turned to become every cell phone's a data harvesting tool, BlackBerry is no longer in the business. Their model didn't survive. Now other companies are coming up trying to fill that gap with people who still want privacy. What's his name? Eric Prince from
Mm-hmm.
Blackwell.
Yep.
Yeah, he's got a cell phone out. There's 2 or 3 others as well. But like I said, I don't want to be data harvested. I mean, nobody's business what I do. Nobody's business what size shirt I wear and what my shoe size is and all this other stuff that they collect. It's kind of odd.
I'll just comment that I have a vision board for my wallpaper. I have different pictures of things that or I'll have certain figures and people, and this is corroborating what you're saying. I put this wallpaper, this collage, so to speak, up. I haven't had it up in many months, and there's a certain person on there that I have as kind of a reminder to, live a certain way. And he's not like some very well known person. And lo and behold, among the first videos I see on Instagram when I'm on a reel, which I don't know if you're familiar, which is like a short form video, is this person. And I thought, what are the odds? And by the way, I had not seen this person on Instagram in over a year. So he's not a recognized person, and I haven't seen his clips that I see on Instagram in a very long time. And it just
Did
so happened
they,
when I put that up,
did they pick it up off of an image on they
it
scanned
it
your wall
it
or something and saw
it
his face?
it, it, it it must have scanned that up, because I just thought, what are the odds that I just happen to put the collage, this, of different photos, and as my wallpaper, and then this pops up. And then I'll also add that there was another person who posted a video, and I don't know if I shared this with you, but this guy paid cash at Walmart or something. He paid cash, and uh, when he got home, he ended up getting an email that said, "Thank you for shopping at Walmart. Here's your something like that, like, thank you for buying XYZ in the electronics department." He said in the video with the audience after this event, he said, "I didn't have my phone on me." And I know I didn't have my phone on me because I was going to use it when I was shopping to compare prices, or what have you. So he knew he did not have his phone with him. All he had was just that was it. So he surmised that it was video surveillance or something where they can check your facial recognition and see who you are.
Well, that's the next big market, is having something that can obscure your facial features so they can't facially recognize you. There's
Yeah,
upside to that someday, but
yeah.
I don't know how to get there from here just yet.
For sure. Oh, one last comment I was going to make here is I've noticed on X, people have been saying that in light of the war that's been going on, uh, something with Elon's, whoever who is in charge of the algorithm there, has been suppressing posts that are critical of the war. So that's been a very common theme I keep
Well,
hearing about.
that's
So
nothing new. The same thing in COVID. Everything, anything that
yeah,
the government doesn't back, they'll repress. But all I can say to people is stay strong, folks. I mean, we have no problems we can't fix. We just have to figure out where we want to go and what we want to do when we get there. That's why these questions I'm asking about, how do we reconstruct our drug policy to end the drug problem? I mean, how do we do it? The cartels are winning this. I mean, we're losing. So, we have to work on these things. We have to put thought and effort into these things, come up with a better way to administer our society, our culture. We can't have these drugs tearing our killing our people and tearing our society apart. Can't allow it. Got to stop it. So
absolutely, absolutely. Well, Mike, always good to chat with you. I'm sure there'll be no shortage of things to talk about in the future. Have a great. I feel like it's Friday, so I'll just say have a great weekend.
yeah, well, thanks. The thing is, like I said, I'm just so disappointed with Trump for falling into it and demonstrating to the world that we really do work for Israel. We really are a Zionist occupied government. And this is a tragedy. This is a sad day for all of America. I mean, it's right in front of your face right now. So we got to fix this. So that's our next task.
Yeah, I think it needs a complete overhaul infrastructure wise, like everything, like Carthage level, like salty earth, just completely cleanse kind of
Yeah.
level stuff. So anyhow, all right. Well,
So thanks for the invite.
thanks for tuning in. And if you enjoyed the show, I encourage you to like, share, and follow if you found value in it. I also have a new show called Markets with Christian White, which is exclusively focused on the financial markets. If that is something of interest to you, I encourage you to check that out. And I always look forward to hearing your feedback and thoughts. And until next time, take care and be well.